This woman was known as the Emperor's schemer, a villainess who had destroyed the empire itself. To the people, she was nothing more than a monster who stole away the Emperor's family and lover. Now, Artezia Rosan stood at the end of her road, dragged across the ground by soldiers as countless commoners watched her with hatred in their eyes. In front of her stood Emperor Lawrence and Emma, whose face was soaked in tears and fury. Emma screamed, "You vile, cruel wench! How could you kill Abe as well? What did Abe do to deserve this? How could you do such a thing to your own blood-related cousin? You need to suffer the same fate as him." Lawrence gently held Emma's shoulder and tried to calm her. "Calm down, Emma," but Emma could no longer control herself. While crying endlessly, she shouted, "How could I possibly calm down? My child died." "Your Majesty, how could you be so serene at a time like this? Abe was your son." Lawrence looked toward Artezia before quietly saying, "Tia is my sister." "I'm sure there must be a misunderstanding, Emma." However, Emma glared at Tia with pure hatred and screamed, "I'm going to avenge him." Lying helplessly on the cold ground, Artezia silently pieced everything together in her mind. Abe must have been murdered. First, she would be framed for murdering their son, and after that, every other crime would quickly follow. But the truth was that there was no need for Lawrence to fabricate false charges against her. She had already committed countless crimes in order to place him on the throne, and Lawrence knew about most of them. This entire situation was simply a plot that Emperor Lawrence himself had conspired. Slowly, he approached her with disappointment painted across his face. "I can't believe that you've done this, Tia. Did you really kill Abe?" Before she could answer, Emma suddenly shouted from the distance. Abe suddenly began vomiting dark blood and died right after that bitch's maid stopped by. At Lawrence's signal, the soldiers dragged Tia's maid before everyone and forced her onto the ground beside her. Lawrence coldly questioned the maid. "Let me ask you, is it true that Marchioness Rosan ordered you to poison Abe?" Trembling in fear, the maid immediately replied, "Yes, Marchioness Rosan first killed Abe, then planned to murder you as well." "Your Majesty." The commoners gasped in shock, horrified by the accusation. Lawrence then looked down at Tia and asked, "Do you have any excuses?" Despite her miserable appearance, Artezia calmly lifted her head and answered, "Your Majesty, you hold the highest authority in all of the empire. You're responsible for the entire empire now, so you should give up your habit of pushing blame on others. That is my last piece of advice to you." The moment those words left her mouth, a furious soldier struck her violently while shouting, "How impudent of you!" Without showing any emotion, Lawrence ordered, "Drag this traitor out of here and lock her up." Afterwards, Artezia was tortured endlessly. She was forced to sign several documents before being dragged into court, where only a handful of nobles and the emperor were present. Seated before Lawrence in chains, she listened as he coldly announced her punishment. "You may be my sister, but the amount of sins you've committed are simply far too great for me to forgive. For the price of running your mouth and ruining the empire, your tongue shall be cut off, and your hands, stained with the blood of innocents, chopped off to set an example for others." Then, after a brief pause, he added, "But I'll spare your life." Hearing those words, T.A. weakly muttered, "Your Majesty." In the next moment, the soldiers grabbed her arms tightly. With a massive axe in hand, they brutally cut off both of her hands. Blood splattered across the floor as unbearable pain consumed her entire body. Later, she was thrown into a dark prison cell, her body bound by heavy chains as she waited for death alone in the darkness. Inside that endless silence, Artezia recalled the memories of her childhood. She remembered her mother gently speaking to her when she was young. "Tia, if things go well for your brother, they will for you as well." The young Artezia obediently answered, "Yes." Artezia's mother was Marchioness of Malila Rosan, as well as Emperor Gregor's lover. According to imperial law, unmarried individuals were forbidden from interacting with married people. Because of that twisted law, powerful nobles would marry off women they desired while keeping them by their side as lovers. Michael Rosan had traded his own wife to the emperor in exchange for a sapphire mine, and from that relationship, Malila gave birth to the emperor's son. That child was Lawrence. However, Artezia herself was not the emperor's daughter. Ever since birth, people constantly whispered cruel words behind her back. Her brother is the emperor's son, but she's the spitting image of Michael. What a mess. Looks like the emperor let this child stay alive. She shouldn't have been born. Because of that, Artezia spent her entire life hearing the same words from her mother over and over again. Be good to your brother. He's the reason why you're still alive. If it weren't for your brother, how would we still be here as the head of a marquisate? You must live for your brother. We can only survive if he becomes the emperor. Would he really treat his only sister poorly once he rises to the throne? Leading your brother to success will bring happiness to our family. Then her mother looked directly into her eyes and asked, "Do you understand?" And like she always did, the young Artezia quietly replied, "Yes, mother." Sitting alone inside the cold prison, Artezia slowly reflected on the life she had lived. No matter how hard she searched her memories, she could not remember a single moment where her mother had truly loved her. Happiness was never something that belonged in her world. The only time she was ever praised was when she accomplished something beneficial for Lawrence. Sometimes it was something as trivial as brewing tea properly. She remembered the moment her father calmly said, "The tea tastes nice," and immediately afterward Artezia Rosan smiled faintly at her and said, "Good job, Artezia." Even such a small compliment had once made her heart tremble with happiness. Other times, the praise came when she did something far greater for Lawrence's sake. She recalled hearing nobles whispering among themselves, "I heard Marquis Rosan's fortune was given to Lawrence to support him." Another noble replied, "It seems like it was quite a large sum of money." Artezia knew very well that her mother's kindness would never truly be directed toward her. She was not foolish. However, the desperate desire to be loved had taken root inside her since childhood, and she could never fully suppress it. It was also easy to justify everything she did. After all, Lawrence, her mother, and herself were bound together by blood. If Lawrence lost the fight for the throne, all of them would die together. There had never once been a case where the family of a failed contender for the throne was spared. To Artezia, everything she did was simply for survival. Thinking that way, she committed countless sins without hesitation. She possessed a frightening talent for conspiracies and evil acts. She remembered the countless schemes she had orchestrated behind the shadows of the palace. One commander shouted in disbelief, "How could you? I believed you were loyal." While the accused man desperately cried out that this is a conspiracy. Yet the soldiers still dragged him away as he screamed, "I've been wronged." Artezia coldly watched it all happen, because she herself had framed loyal servants and sacrificed innocent people to destroy her political enemies. She ruined the political stability of the empire and committed countless smaller crimes hidden within the palace walls. Outside the palace, fear and death became common among the citizens. People whispered nervously in the streets, "Another person is coming out of the palace dead," while others immediately hushed them. Be quiet. Artezia understood better than anyone that she was the one responsible for the suffering of the empire's people. She was the one who caused countless deaths. She'd even used senses Lycia, the empire's greatest hope, and ultimately led her to ruin. But back then, Artezia believed everything was necessary for Lawrence's sake. After all, it was a battle for the throne. Whenever she succeeded, Lawrence would simply praise her with a smile. "Good job, Tia." Even though Artezia knew deep inside that all of her justifications were merely excuses, she still carried out every crime calmly and indifferently. Eventually, Lawrence finally claimed the emperor's crown. Artezia was the greatest contributor to his rise. Yet after helping him obtain everything, she quietly stepped away without asking for any reward. The reason was simple. She was afraid. That fear was also why she disbanded the information guild she had spent years building with enormous amounts of money and effort. She believed that since they had worked together for so long, Lawrence would spare her life. But Artezia knew too much. She had committed too many sins alongside him, and because of that, Lawrence silenced her forever. He cut out her tongue so she could never speak, and cut off her hands so she could never leave behind records of the truth. In the end, she finally understood her role. When the hunt is over, the dog is cooked. Artezia had been nothing more than Lawrence's hunting dog, and this prison was the pot waiting to boil her alive. Suddenly, a strange sound escaped from her throat. The nearby soldier looked at her in shock as Artezia continued laughing weakly. Even without a tongue, she could still laugh. She knew her sins better than anyone. She did not wish to be acknowledged as innocent, nor did she seek forgiveness. However, there was still one thing she wanted to ask, just once. Her mind drifted toward Lycia, the Senxes of the Empire. Artezia remembered how she had threatened Lycia and forced her into marrying Lawrence. She had fully expected Lycia to resent her for it. So once, she quietly asked her, "Don't you resent me?" However, Lycia's answer had been completely unexpected. With her pale and emotionless expression, the Senxes softly replied, "Will you feel better if I resent you? Will you feel as if your sins have been lifted a little?" "What should I do? I've already forgiven you." Those words deeply shook Artezia. Lycia had been used as nothing more than a symbol to strengthen Lawrence's weak legitimacy for the throne, and Artezia herself had taken full advantage of her. Yet despite everything, Licia forgave her. The entire empire had celebrated joyfully when the Sphinxes became crown princess. During Lawrence's coronation, flowers gifted to the empress piled against the palace walls like mountains. The empire dressed Licia's body in gold and fur and laid silk beneath her feet. A woman born in a poor northern barony had suddenly obtained every luxury imaginable. But despite all the wealth surrounding her, Licia looked far more miserable than when she wandered through noble society without a single jewel on her body or traveled through plague-ridden regions in worn-out clothes to help the sick. The beautiful golden hair that once shimmered with traces of red had become pale and dry, while her thick red lips lost all color. Seeing her like that filled Artezia with guilt because she knew she was the one who dragged Licia into that living hell. Artezia had sworn to herself that she would at least protect Licia from suffering. But in the end, she failed. Inside the darkness of her prison cell, she quietly apologized in her heart. "I'm sorry I wasn't able to protect you from this cold palace, and from Lawrence." Artezia knew better than anyone that Lawrence had always possessed abusive tendencies. On top of that, he was extremely sensitive about the legitimacy of his claim to the throne. Those two traits eventually twisted together and gave birth to a deep hatred and inferiority complex toward Licia, the new empress who was loved and praised by the entire empire. While the citizens admired the Sphinxes endlessly, Lawrence slowly isolated her within the golden walls of the palace. Despite all the luxury surrounding her, Licia gradually withered away like a dying flower trapped inside a beautiful prison. One day, chaos suddenly erupted inside the palace. Servants screamed in panic, The Empress has fainted," although Licia possessed holy powers strong enough to pull others back from the brink of death. Those powers were completely useless against the illness destroying her own body. Even so, when Artezia visited her, Licia still smiled gently and said, "Tia, I'm fine. The reason I'm here is because of me, not you. Regardless of everything you've done to me, or the reason why, I was the one who agreed to marry Emperor Lawrence in the end." Hearing those words only made Artezia's guilt even heavier. "Your Majesty," she whispered weakly. However, Licia calmly continued, "I know how much you've gone through to survive this far. It doesn't justify the fact that you hurt others, but I've decided to forgive you. So, feel free to take me off the great burden on your shoulders, Tia. And if you ever meet Lord Cedric one day, tell him that Licia had lived and passed on with no regrets." Holding back her emotions, Artezia quietly replied, "Yes, I most definitely will." But deep inside, Licia carried her own sorrow. "Tia, I'm sorry I couldn't save you." Those became the Sench's final words. After that, Artezia could no longer tell whether she had truly spoken with Licia or merely dreamed of her in the darkness of prison. She had completely lost track of time locked inside those chains. Days and nights blurred together endlessly until suddenly someone appeared before her cell. "Serves you right, you evil bitch." Through her hazy vision, Artezia recognized the woman immediately. Vinia, Licia's personal maid. Vinia grabbed Artezia harshly by the hair and sneered. "Looks like there's not much to the once great and mighty Emperor's schemer. My only regret is that I can't kill you right now." Artezia could barely think properly anymore. Why is she saving me? In her weakened state, she could only vaguely understand that she was being transported somewhere. She was hidden inside a laundry wagon and secretly taken out of the imperial palace. Afterward, Vinia placed her into a carriage and continued the journey. Along the way, Vinia explained to someone nearby, it must have been difficult for her due to the after effects of her torture and her ride here. She was in such a poor state that I brewed some tea for her, but she only took a couple sips before falling asleep. Aga. Suddenly, Artezia slowly opened her eyes. Sitting before her was a familiar man. "So you're awake, Marchioness Rosan." The moment she recognized him, her eyes widened in disbelief. "Cedric?" The man coldly stared at her and said, "You used to be the greatest schemer in all of the empire. But I guess it wasn't enough to save yourself in the end, was it?" Artezia looked around in confusion before realizing where she was. "This is Cedric's military camp. Why am I here? Why did you—" Cedric Ebron should have been her enemy. In the past, Artezia herself had blown up an embankment on the Ava River to frame him. At the time, Cedric had been returning from the western borders under the Emperor's orders. But instead of immediately obeying, he deployed his army to stop the incoming flood and save innocent lives. Because he disobeyed the Emperor's command, Lawrence grew suspicious of him. Eventually, Cedric lost everything and became a fugitive hunted by the Empire. Yet now, that same man stood before Artezia and pleaded with her. "Please help us. We must put an end to Lawrence's tyranny. I need you. Marchioness Rosan, you still have your sharp intellect. You're still alive, So as long as you have the determination and will, you can achieve anything. Didn't you see Lawrence's brutality for yourself? Hearing those words awakened memories within Artezia. While being transported in the wagon, she had witnessed the devastation Lawrence caused across the empire. The fertile town of Barquis, once famous for producing the finest wine in the empire, had completely vanished. According to Vinia, Lawrence destroyed it because someone from Barquis had been involved in an assassination plot alongside Archduke Roiger. And Barquis was not the only victim. Countless other towns suffered similarly horrific massacres under Lawrence's rule. It was all meaningless slaughter. Then suddenly, Cedric knelt before her, the Archduke himself, kneeling before his own enemy. With desperation in his voice, he said, "We must bring down Lawrence, no matter what it takes. But the power difference between our forces is far too great. My subordinates and I only know how to deal with military affairs and have no clue how to reduce the gap. All for the greater cause." Artezia froze when those words crossed her mind because Cedric himself quietly repeated them aloud. All for the greater cause. Those were words she had never once heard from Lawrence, despite dedicating her entire life to him. From the moment she first stained her hands with blood, Artezia had sworn she would live without regrets until the day she died. But now, for the very first time, regret began consuming her heart. After a long silence, Cedric sighed and said, "I see even you can't come up with a way to overcome the current situation because the power imbalance is too great. I'll assign some of my men to escort you to a rural village. I hope you can live out the rest of your days in peace." But Artezia no longer desired peace. She realized there was only one way left to fix everything: an ancient magic circle. Magic had long vanished from the world because of the horrifying human sacrifices it demanded, and because very few people could still write the ancient magic scripts properly. However, Artezia could still read and write that dead language with ease. "Then we can just go back in time before it all happened." With trembling determination, Artezia bit down hard on the remains of her severed tongue and chewed the inside of her mouth until blood filled it. "This is my only chance. Pull yourself together. Focus. It's the perfect human sacrifice." Using her own blood, Artezia drew the ancient magic circle and activated the forbidden ritual. Dark energies swallowed the surroundings as she screamed in agony, "Ah!" The moment her body began disappearing, Cedric rushed forward in shock and shouted, "Marchioness Rosan." As consciousness faded away, Artezia's final thoughts echoed quietly within her heart. "I pray that in the next life, your wish will be fulfilled." That's what she thought. But then, why have I returned? When Artezia slowly opened her eyes once more, she found herself lying on a soft bed instead of the cold prison floor. Confused, she immediately grabbed a lantern and walked toward the mirror nearby. The reflection staring back at her was not the broken and tortured woman from before. Her hands were intact, her body unharmed, and her face had returned to its youthful appearance. Trembling slightly, she whispered, "I've returned. Was the magic circle incorrect? I intended to exchange my life in order to turn back time, but I'm still alive." Unable to understand what had happened, she quietly stared at herself in the mirror. Whether it was the magic circle, or something else that went wrong, there must be a reason for why I survived. Then, remembering the sight of Cedric kneeling before her in her previous life, Artezia slowly clenched her fist and made a silent vow. "Since you knelt in front of a devil like me, I will now dirty my hands in your place." It was Imperial Strength Year 482, June 2nd. Artezia had turned 18 only 8 days earlier. There were still 2 years left before she would officially inherit the title of Marchioness Rosan. During breakfast, Marchioness Rosan elegantly spoke to Lawrence. "The heat was stifling last night. Did you sleep well?" Lawrence calmly answered, "Yes." The temperature cooled overnight. With a gentle smile, Rosan continued, "Still, if the food isn't to your taste, tell me ahead of time, and I'll have the chefs make you some cool melon soup." While silently observing the familiar scene before her, Artezia began organizing her thoughts. "I need to check how the situation is coming along now." Suddenly, she stood up from her seat. Surprised, Rosan frowned slightly and asked, "Your brother hasn't even gotten halfway through his meal, but you're already leaving?" Artezia answered calmly, "I don't have much of an appetite." Rosan immediately scolded her. "But you must observe table etiquette." Ignoring the criticism, Artezia turned toward Lawrence instead. "I want to go to the temple at the city outskirts. Is that all right with you, brother?" Lawrence barely looked at her before replying indifferently, "Do as you want." Artezia lowered her head slightly. "Thank you, brother." Instantly, their mother smiled warmly toward Lawrence. "How did you grow to be so thoughtful? You're even caring towards your younger sister." Later, as Artezia prepared to leave, her maid Alice approached her with concern. "Miss, You didn't have an appetite again, did you? Why are you out so early? You're usually more. The moment Artezia saw her face, her heart trembled slightly. Alice. She was the first and most faithful servant Artezia had ever chosen for herself. In the previous timeline, Alice had eventually been poised in her place. Quietly, Artezia called out, "Alice." Confused, the maid tilted her head. "What is it, miss? Is there something you want me to do?" After a brief silence, Artezia replied softly, "It's nothing." Artezia knew Alice was the type of person who struggled to express emotions honestly. After collecting herself, she calmly said, "Alice? Yes, we're heading out to the temple." Alice immediately nodded. "All right, miss." However, Artezia lowered her voice and whispered additional instructions into Alice's ear. Alice silently nodded in understanding. Afterward, Artezia added, "After that, pack a lunchbox full of sandwiches with lots of meat. Also, bring a tea set used for picnics. Sophie will dress me." "Yes, miss." While brushing Artezia's hair, Alice suddenly asked, "How should I do your hair?" Artezia first answered neatly, but after a brief pause, she changed her mind. "No, make it pretty." Alice blinked in surprise before smiling teasingly. "Oh my. I guess the miss is at that age as well." Artezia frowned slightly. "What age?" Alice giggled softly. "The age where you want to look pretty and find a splendid man." Immediately, Artezia replied, "Don't say such nonsense. I'm going to the temple." However, Alice only continued smiling mischievously. "You have some expectations as well though, right?" Artezia sighed. "Nonsense." Alice then proudly said, "Just look at who your mother is. If we consider Madame's beauty and her age, you, as society's jewel, should now be—" "Oops!" Before she could finish, Marchioness Rosan suddenly appeared nearby and coldly interrupted. "You can't be thinking of going out to seduce a man with that ugly face." Without reacting emotionally, Artezia calmly replied, "I'm going to the temple. What good would it do to seduce priests, mother?" Rosan simply hummed quietly before changing the subject. "Did brother say that he wouldn't go out today?" Artezia asked. Rosan answered immediately, "He left already. He mustn't get caught in some vixen's snare." Artezia lowered her gaze slightly and replied, "There's no need to worry. Brother is wise." Hearing that, Rosan smiled proudly. "Yes, your brother is different from other men. It still worries me. It's inevitable that a man will forget his mother the moment he meets his partner." Then she stared directly at Artezia and asked, "You're not going to be like that, right?" Artezia lowered her eyes obediently before answering her mother softly, "I will always stay by your side, mother." Hearing that response, Marchioness Rosan smiled with satisfaction. "Of course you will. You're my daughter." After finishing her preparations, Alice stepped back and happily announced, "All finished." Rosan looked at Artezia approvingly before saying, "Enjoy your outing, go offer donations and refresh yourself. You should always be attentive toward Faith." Artezia quietly replied, "Yes, mother." Once they were alone, Alice looked at her with concern. "Miss, are you all right?" Artezia calmly answered, "It's a common occurrence." Alice hesitated before replying softly, "Yes. But still." Without showing much emotion, Artezia simply said, "Put my dress on." While adjusting her clothes, Alice smiled warmly. "You're so lovely. Your hair is a bit curled, but it'll straighten out soon." Hearing such words directed at herself felt unfamiliar to Artezia. Lovely. That word seems so strange. It doesn't fit me. At that moment, another maid entered excitedly. "Wow, miss! You're so pretty today." Alice immediately added, "It would be great if you always went around like this." However, Artezia only responded coldly. "Flattery won't get you anywhere." "Did you do as I told you?" The maid immediately nodded. "Yes, I wrapped the lunchboxes and put them in the carriage." Artezia gave a small nod of approval. "Well done." Then, as she prepared to leave the estate, she quietly thought to herself, "Changing the future starts now." Meanwhile, at the barracks located on the outskirts of the Crotez Empire's capital, tension filled the air as Cedric Ebron and his men discussed the political situations surrounding the Western Army. Frail spoke with frustration in his voice. "Now's not the time to be stubborn, Your Grace. Let's just hold the victory celebration. His Majesty's trying to separate you from the Western Army. So we should just hold the victory celebration for the Ebron Order under us and not invite the Western Army. It's better for the Western Army as well. Even if they don't get the glory, they'll still get the coin." However, Cedric immediately rejected the idea. These soldiers suffered for over a year on low wages. They deserve the glory too. Riches aren't important. Even if it was a resounding victory, without glory and honor to unite them, the Western Army will be dissolved. And if the West collapses, the whole empire will be at risk. Frail sighed helplessly. Then what will you do? Cedric answered firmly. I was going to ask the Archbishop to mediate. Frail looked doubtful. Will that help? Cedric quietly replied, I have to try something. Then, after a brief pause, he added, I had an unsettling dream, so I was going to visit the temple either way. Confused, Frail repeated, a dream? Cedric's expression darkened slightly as he remembered it. It was of a woman. She was crying silently until tears completely covered her face. And somehow, seeing her suffer like that made it feel as though something inside his heart was being painfully squeezed. Even after waking up, the dream left behind a strange bitterness he could not explain. Before the conversation could continue further, a carriage suddenly approached nearby. One of the attendants hurried over nervously. My apologies, Sir Knights. Our carriage's wheel fell out. Frail frowned slightly. A wheel? Can you fix it? The servant quickly answered, not a problem. From inside the carriage, a calm female voice spoke politely. Thank you for your help. The moment Cedric heard her voice and looked toward the carriage, his eyes widened slightly. It's the woman from my dream. While the knights repaired the wheel, the servant eventually announced, we're done with the repairs. Artezia then stepped forward gracefully and apologized. I'm sorry if we delayed your journey. Frail immediately shook his head. No need to apologize. It's only natural that we help those in need. You look like a noble lady. It's dangerous to travel about without a guard, Artezia calmly explained. It's only a midday trip to the temple. Since we're in the middle of the road, it's a bit inconvenient, but once we reach the temple, I will thank you properly. Flustered by her politeness, Frail waved his hands quickly. No need for that. Artezia gave a small nod before replying, then later. At that moment, Cedric himself stepped forward and opened the carriage door for her. Then, while looking directly at Artezia, he quietly said, Please get on. Cedric quietly said, Please get on, with his support. Artezia carefully stepped into the carriage while holding his hand for a brief moment. After sitting down, she slowly pulled back the curtain beside the window and looked outside once more. There, Cedric Ebron remained standing silently, his gaze still fixed on her as if he could not look away. After some time, Alice's voice was heard from outside the carriage. We've arrived. The moment Artezia stepped down from the carriage at the temple, one of the church guardians immediately rushed forward in surprise. Ah, welcome, Lady Rosan. Artezia politely lowered her head. Thank you for coming out to meet me. I've brought a scented wax candle that I wish to offer to the saint. The guardian smiled warmly before replying, Come this way. The saint will be pleased with your kind offering. Soon afterward, Artezia knelt quietly before the grand statue inside the temple and closed her eyes in prayer. Deep inside her heart, she sincerely whispered, even though magic was used, Forgive me for sacrificing this body of mine. Although I chose to serve the foolish and wicked, Grand Duke Cedric is a righteous person, so please watch over him. And please protect your Sinx's daughter, Lisha. After her prayer ended, the guardian respectfully asked, Would you like to meet with the bishop? However, Artezia calmly shook her head. No need. I'll be leaving to rest and have some tea. The guardian immediately nodded. Then I shall prepare the gazebo for you. But before leaving, Artezia added, Also I wish to request for one more thing. Some knights helped us on our way here today. I wish to thank them. Could you lead my maid to them? Later, while quietly drinking tea at the gazebo, Artezia finally saw Cedric approaching her. The atmosphere around them felt strangely tense as they formally faced one another for the first time. Artezia calmly spoke first. We should reintroduce ourselves. Your Grace, Grand Duke Cedric. I am Artezia Rosan. Cedric's eyes narrowed slightly. Martianized Rosans. Artezia immediately finished the sentence for him. Yes, I am her daughter. His expression instantly grew colder. If you knew that I was the Grand Duke of Ebron and deliberately broke your carriage so we could meet, then you should also know that I dislike Marchioness Rosan, right? Without hesitation, Artezia replied, I know. Cedric frowned slightly and continued questioning her. How is it possible that a noblewoman's carriage wheel would fall off like that? You even handed lunchboxes to the knights, as if you'd planned it from the start. However, Artezia remained completely calm. It was necessary for me to do that because there's something I need to tell you. For a moment, Cedric silently stared at her. This is the woman from my dreams. Unlike the dream, her eyes are cool and bright. Still cautious, he finally said, I hope whatever you wanted to say is worth as much as my time that you're wasting. Artezia quietly poured tea for him before softly replying, Thank you. Cedric watched her movements carefully, unable to understand what was happening. Why on earth is Marchioness Rosan's daughter acting like this toward me? I'll drink the tea first and see what she has to say. Then suddenly, Artezia slowly stood from her seat and looked directly at him. Your Grace, Grand Duke. After a brief pause, she calmly said the words that completely shattered Cedric's composure. Please propose to me. Cough. Cedric nearly choked on his tea after hearing Artezia's sudden proposal. Coughing in disbelief, he stared at her and said, "My goodness, never thought I'd hear such words from a young miss I met just today." However, Artezia remained perfectly calm. "I'm not asking for a real marriage. I only asked for this in order to solve a problem your grace has been struggling with." Cedric narrowed his eyes slightly. "A problem I'm struggling with?" Artezia immediately explained. "You and His Majesty have been in a stalemate for 2 months because of issues regarding the victory celebration, correct? It's a problem that the ill cannot receive proper treatment, but because of that, one wrong move and both the Western and Southern army's structure could collapse. I know that this is what concerns you. Your Grace likely came here to request that the Archbishop mediate, right?" After a brief silence, Cedric answered, "Yes." Artezia then coldly stated, "That is a very unwise decision. Your Grace will have to give all the glory to the Western army." Cedric calmly replied, "That would be for the best. One does not require merit to succeed." However, Artezia immediately shook her head. "But someone must lead the Western army. And others would be outraged too if they heard His Majesty replace the true hero with another man during the victory celebration. The generals will be disappointed and abandon the Western army. His Majesty greatly favors my brother, but my brother lacks the nobles' support. When the fight for the throne begins, that will surely be his undoing. His Majesty is finding this regrettable as of right now. That is why your Grace is the ideal person to support my brother's legitimacy. You are also in the line of succession. You are both the owner of the North and influential in the West. If your Grace just gives the impression of supporting my brother..." Before she could finish, Cedric interrupted her coldly. "I understand what you are trying to say. The recognition that the soldiers rightfully deserve. I have no intention of colluding or begging for it." With that, he turned as if preparing to leave. But suddenly Artezia grabbed his arm and quietly said, "Then what about the village of conspirators at the Grand Duchy?" Cedric's expression instantly darkened. "Is Lady Artezia threatening me right now?" But Artezia calmly replied, "No, I am offering you advice with the utmost sincerity." After a tense silence, Cedric finally asked, "What do you want?" Artezia looked directly into his eyes. "Your Grace must seek more practical profit." Immediately, Cedric frowned. "Is that practical profit obtained by using underhanded and unjust methods for the sake of winning?" However, Artezia answered without hesitation. "I'm saying that your Grace is throwing away your own honor in order to preserve the Western armies and Grand Duke Ebron's reputation. Mother and brother do not know about this meeting. Sabotaging the carriage's wheel was not so that I could deceive your Grace, it was to deceive onlookers. It is common for men and women to meet by chance and fall in love. So, tell them that you're resigning from the power struggle with the Emperor and returning to the capital because you fell in love with me. And then propose to me. If you marry me, His Majesty will be less wary of your Grace." Cedric silently stared at her before asking, "So Lady Artezia thinks this will protect the Grand Duke? And what will Lady Artezia stand to gain from this marriage? If it's not to force me to take Lawrence's side through a political marriage, what's the reason?" Artezia finally revealed her true goal. "All I want is to receive the inheritance from Marquis Rosan and become independent." Cedric replied thoughtfully, "Lady Artezia will likely get the inheritance anyway." But Artezia quietly explained, "I can only inherit at the age of 20. I am currently 18 years old. Right now, for the next 2 years. Mother has control of Marquis Rosan's property." Cedric then said, "However, with a guardian's consent you can marry. And after marrying you will be recognized as an adult." Artezia nodded slowly. "Yes, that's true. But if I go and pick just anybody to marry, Mother will have no reason to forfeit. She'd rather kill off my prospective husband than to have me married off. In that aspect, your Grace would make the best candidate for me." Hearing this, Cedric asked carefully, "Are you planning on betraying your mother and brother?" Artezia's eyes remained cold as she answered, "I'm just a tool. If a tool ends up in someone else's hands, people won't consider it betrayal. Please protect me and stay legally married to me for just 2 years, your Grace. If you can do that, I will." After a brief pause, she finished her sentence with absolute confidence. "Make your Grace the Emperor." Cedric's expression immediately turned cold after hearing Artezia's final words. "Are you trying to plant treasonous ideas in me?" he asked sharply. However, Artezia remained completely calm. "I'm simply talking about succession. How is that treasonous? The Emperor still hasn't named a crown prince as of yet, and your Grace also has a right to the throne. If you wish for the citizens of the Artez Empire to live in peace, then you must ascend the throne as the Emperor. Lawrence is cruel, and behind the scenes Royer is greedy. If they were to ascend the throne, the empire will become a living hell. Hearing this, Cedric immediately stepped back. I can't listen to this anymore, Artezia quietly called after him. Your Grace. But Cedric had already turned away and left. Watching his figure disappear, Artezia thought calmly. Seems like he requires some time to think about it. After he was gone, Alice hurried over nervously. Miss, are you okay? Artezia looked at her calmly. With what? Alice hesitated before replying. He got angry and just left. And it was really scary. However, Artezia simply answered. It was to be expected. Alice awkwardly nodded. Ah, all right. As evening slowly approached, Alice asked once more. Miss, will you be returning home now? But Artezia shook her head slightly. Let's wait for a little longer. Confused, Alice replied. But that person has already left. At that moment, another man approached them respectfully. Excuse me, I'm Benjamin Corner from the Western Army. I've come to escort the lady of the Rosan household home under the orders of Grand Duke Ebron. Alice's eyes widened in surprise. Oh my! While traveling back toward the capital, their carriage was suddenly surrounded by soldiers. Stop right there! The coachman quickly pulled the reins. Whoa! From inside the carriage, Artezia calmly asked, What's wrong? Benjamin looked outside before answering. There seems to be an inspection. A knight stepped forward and questioned them. Benjamin immediately introduced himself. My name is Benjamin Corner. I'm a knight of the 4th Corps in the Western Army. I've been ordered by Grand Duke Ebron to escort Lady Rosan home. Hearing Cedric's name, the knight repeated in surprise. Grand Duke Ebron? Then Artezia herself stepped out slightly and greeted him politely. Hello, Sir Kishar. Recognizing her immediately, Kishar asked. Where are you returning from at this late hour, Lady Artezia? Artezia calmly replied. I was on my way back from the temple and lost track of time. Kishar nodded slowly. I see. But why are you with a Western Army soldier? Without hesitation, Artezia smoothly explained. My carriage broke on the way to the temple just as Grand Duke Ebron passed by. He helped me. He knew I didn't have an escort, so he lent me Sir Corner. Kishar finally relaxed. I see. It seems Lady Artezia is all grown up now. I'll escort you home. Hearing that, Benjamin respectfully said, Then I'll take my leave. However, Artezia smiled faintly and replied, Since you're sending me off, Sir Corner, it wouldn't be a bother if you stayed for a cup of tea before leaving. But Benjamin politely refused. No need. There's nothing safer than a royal guard escorting you home. Now that I've completed my mission, I'll be returning. Artezia gave a small nod. All right, thank you. Then suddenly, she looked back toward Kishore and said, Ah, Sir Kishore. I received prayer candles today after praying at the temple. I wanted to send some to your daughter, Meal. Surprised by her kindness, Kishore replied, Thank you for your concern. Artezia continued gently, I hope to go on a picnic with Meal when she feels better, and with Sir Kishore too. Hearing his daughter mentioned, Kishore awkwardly smiled. Ah, that child. Lately she's been bugging me a lot. Artezia calmly answered. I'm sure she doesn't mean to. Kishore sighed softly. I hope that's true. Then Artezia casually added, However, the fact that Sir Kishore is here, her eyes narrowed slightly, means that His Majesty was also here, right? Later that night, after finally arriving back at the mansion, Artezia quietly walked through the gallery alongside Alice. While walking, she suddenly ordered, Alice, give the pouches we prepared as gifts to each of the Emperor's aides. Alice looked surprised. That means we'll be using everything that was prepared. However, Artezia calmly replied, It's all right. Alice immediately bowed her head. Yes, I understand, miss. Soon afterward, Artezia personally handed coins to the guards standing at the entrance, and they immediately allowed her to pass. Thank you, lady, one of the soldiers said respectfully. Then, standing before the imperial chambers, Artezia calmly announced, Please tell the emperor that Artezia, daughter of Mirella, has come to greet him. Artezia calmly looked toward the imperial guards and said, I just don't want the emperor and my mother's time together to be interrupted. I'll handle it if there's a guest. Immediately, both guards bowed respectfully. Of course. After that, Artezia entered the room gracefully and lowered herself before the emperor. I am honored that your majesty has come to visit this humble house. One bow before the emperor. I am Artezia, the daughter of Mirella. Long live the emperor. The emperor looked at her carefully before smiling faintly. You've grown so much since the last time I saw you. You would be prettier if you looked more like your mother. Beside him, Mirella smiled proudly. Your majesty knows how to appreciate beauty. The emperor then asked, How old are you this year? Artezia calmly replied, I'm 18. Hearing that, the emperor nodded thoughtfully. She's blossomed into a woman now. It's time to start looking for a suitable husband for her. Immediately, Marilla reacted nervously. Hold on, suitable husband? She just turned 18. However, the emperor chuckled softly. I know that you want to have your daughter by your side forever, but she should at least be engaged before she turns 20. As the emperor, I am capable of finding someone suitable for her. We can't have her live with her brother forever. Artezia politely lowered her head. Thank you. At that moment, one of the guards quietly approached her and whispered, A guest has arrived. Artezia calmly turned toward the emperor. We have a guest. The emperor casually waved his hand. Go on. She bowed once more. Pardon me. I shall take my leave. Once outside, the guard quickly explained, Countess Eunice is outside making a scene. She wants to see the emperor. Artezia nodded calmly. Okay, I'll deal with it. The guard looked surprised. Did you know that she would be coming? Artezia answered quietly. Yes, it was just a guess though. Amazed, the guard muttered, That's amazing. Meanwhile, outside, Countess Eunice was already screaming furiously. Hey, get out of my way! You dare to prevent me? I'm the daughter of the emperor. Then suddenly, Artezia appeared before her and calmly greeted. Hello, Countess Eunice. What brings you by? Without hesitation, Eunice angrily slapped Artezia across the face and shouted, Call your mother here! However, Artezia did not react emotionally at all. Instead, she calmly looked back at her and said, You're quite thoughtless. Eunice frowned furiously. What? Artezia quietly continued. All of the emperor's servants saw you slap me so callously. Eunice scoffed loudly. But Artezia calmly added, The emperor despises noisy people. Plus, what kind of man wants to see his daughter while he's with his mistress? She's not even a young child but a married daughter with a child of her own. Eunice clenched her teeth in frustration. But Artezia continued speaking coldly. If I were to cry and make a fuss for this pain and humiliation, he'll come out. My mother would also not miss the chance to cry and complain about the disrespect you've shown her. What do you think will happen? Instantly, Eunice shouted in anger. How dare you? But Artezia's expression remained perfectly calm. The harsher you treat my mother, the more the emperor would feel sympathy for her. So, should we go through with this? At that moment, Alice quietly restrained Eunice from behind while Artezia firmly grabbed her wrist and coldly said, Just go back. Eunice glared at her furiously. Who are you to give me an order? If you're so confident about this, then why don't you go ahead and try? Artezia slowly narrowed her eyes before answering in an icy voice. If you wish to push out my mother, then you must accept being loved in a different way. Artezia calmly looked at Countess Eunice and said, If you wish to push out my mother, then you must accept being loved in a different way. Eunice could only stare at her in confusion. Artezia continued softly. His Majesty cherished you as a daughter and even used to greatly favor you. Make him recall those memories and be adored as his precious daughter again. Completely caught off guard. Eunice stuttered, Just why are you? But Artezia simply interrupted her calmly. I will forget about today's events. Please go back. No parent wants their child to catch them with their mistress. Then she turned toward the guards and ordered, Countess Eunice will be returning to her residence. Will you escort her? One of the guards hesitated. Would that be all right? Artezia calmly nodded. We mustn't interrupt His Majesty when he's resting. Countess Eunice, please don't forget my words and go back. Do not forget what filial piety truly is. Eunice stood there speechless. What? Meanwhile, the guards respectfully approached her. Countess. As Eunice was escorted away, Artezia quietly thought to herself, Countess Eunice. She's the perfect person to push out my mother while not having as much influence as her. She must not get on the emperor's bad side. Suddenly, Artezia heard footsteps descending the stairs as the emperor himself appeared. They said Charlotte came. However, before he could continue, Artezia immediately bowed her head and calmly replied, I'm sorry. The emperor looked confused. Nothing happened. Countess Eunice made a small mistake because she misses her father emperor. I cannot hold that against your majesty nor the countess. However, Marilla coldly frowned beside him. Is my status so low in her mind? Artezia quickly answered, I am without a father figure, so I can sympathize with Countess Eunice. Her longing for father emperor must have led her to do it by impulse. As the Marquis's heir, I will ensure that your majesty's stay here is comfortable. There's no need to make a big fuss over something this trivial. Hearing this mature response, the emperor smiled with satisfaction. Your heart is commendable. But we are responsible for how Charlotte was raised. We've spoiled her too much, so she's developed a violent temper. She has 3 children now. It's about time that she became more amiable. I'm speechless that she would make a mark on the face of a maiden in her prime. Then he looked directly at Artezia and generously declared, Ask me for anything. it shall be my birthday gift to you. However, Artezia calmly lowered her eyes. If you'll forgive me for my impertinence, I'd like for you to accept this gift that I've prepared. The emperor looked surprised. Gift? Artezia quietly explained. I had originally made it for my mother as a way to thank her for giving birth to me. It usually comes in pairs for parents, but since I had no one to accept the other, I dared to think of you when I prepared it. I couldn't bear to face reality and was unable to give it to my mother. But if you were to accept it, I would be overjoyed. Hearing that, the emperor's expression softened immediately. If it's for your parents, then that must mean it was made for Marilia and me, no? Did you think we would reject such a gift? Bring it forth. Artezia then presented the gift to him personally, and the emperor happily handed the matching piece to Marilla. Here, and I as well. It looks good. No need to behave so carefully. Marilla smiled warmly and added, You are Marilla's daughter, so you are like a daughter to us. Artezia politely lowered her head. I am honored, the emperor laughed warmly. I'm looking forward to it. Artezia quietly answered, yes. However, deep inside, her thoughts were completely different. In the past, all I wanted to hear was this one sentence. You are my daughter. But now, family. It's just sweet fantasy. The fact that the emperor felt momentarily indebted to me after today's events will be a huge advantage. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Cedric remained unable to forget her words. If you wish for the citizens of the Cortez Empire to live in peace, then you must ascend the throne as the emperor. Those words echoed endlessly inside his mind. It had already been around 20 years since his parents were falsely accused of treason and executed. Many people had once urged him to seek revenge by becoming emperor, but instead he had chosen the opposite path and distanced himself from politics entirely. The reason why he acted as though he hated politics and became the empire's shield was simply to protect the remaining people by his side. Yet Artezia's reasoning was completely different. Her reasons were not for survival nor revenge, but for the commoner's well-being, becoming emperor for the sake of the empire's citizens. Unable to stop thinking about her, Cedric remained awake throughout the night until one of his men finally approached him. It seems that you weren't able to sleep last night, Cedric quietly admitted. Sleep wouldn't come to me. The knight smiled slightly. Sleep wouldn't come to me either. However, Cedric immediately stood up with determination in his eyes. No, there's no time for that. I'm going to visit the palace today. Then, after a brief pause, he quietly thought to himself, I'll meet with the daughter of Marquis Rosan and ask her once more. The next day, Cedric personally came to the Rosan estate. As soon as he arrived, one of the imperial soldiers quickly informed the emperor. Grand Duke Cedric requests an audience with your majesty. Hearing this, the emperor looked surprised but pleased. Cedric does? Let him in. Come here. I was just resting. After entering, Cedric respectfully bowed his head. Thank you for seeing me. If I had known Countess Eunice was here, I wouldn't have bothered you. However, the emperor burst into laughter. Ha ha ha. Why are you acting so stiff? I'm hurt. Charlotte is my daughter, and you are my nephew, so that makes you two cousins. This makes us all one big family, you know? Hearing those words, Cedric's expression remained calm, but inside, his thoughts turned cold. It's so strange hearing this from the man who accused my parents of treason and executed them. Meanwhile, the emperor continued smiling warmly. I hope all of you will get along well together. This includes Tia as well, of course. Cedric immediately asked, Are you talking about Lady Artezia? The emperor nodded knowingly. Correct. I heard that you had a knight escort her home, Cedric calmly explained. It was a trivial matter, but I see you're already aware of it. We coincidentally met at the temple. She didn't have a single guard with her, so I sent one of mine. However, the emperor simply laughed louder. Then, you're telling me that there's no connection between you circling around the capital before finally coming to meet me and Lady Artezia? Even the cautious Duke has this kind of side. I'm sure she'd like it if you visit her today. Immediately, Cedric tried to return to the original matter. I did not come here because of Lady Artezia, Your Majesty. It's about the Western Army. But before he could finish, the emperor suddenly shouted sharply, How impudent! Don't you know why I've chosen to meet you here instead of in my study? You shouldn't discuss business in places where family gathers. Let's discuss this in 4 days' time. Did you think we would forget about the Western Army's contributions? After that, the emperor personally offered him tea. Here, drink. As Cedric accepted the cup, he quietly observed the emperor's completely changed attitude and thought. He's only received news that I met Lady Artezia yesterday, but His Majesty's attitude has definitely changed. Later, Cedric headed toward the Rosan estate once more. The servants immediately panicked upon seeing him. Grand Duke Ebron? Cedric calmly asked. Is Lady Artezia here? The servants hesitated nervously before replying. She seems to have gone out. Then one of the maids quickly answered. She went to Countendale's ball. Another servant immediately added. Ah, she went to Countendale's? My apologies, Your Grace. I've just been informed that the miss has gone to Countendale's ball. If you could spare some more time, I'll have her return immediately. However, Cedric's expression instantly turned cold. Is your position higher than Lady Artezia in this house? The servant froze in shock. What? Cedric continued calmly but firmly. Lady Artezia is the heir to this estate. I asked since I wasn't sure if a butler had the authority to tell her when she should come and go. Immediately flustered, the servant bowed repeatedly. No, I cannot. I thought that since Master Lawrence would be returning soon, Your Grace and Master could chat while I escorted the miss. However, Cedric coldly interrupted him. It seems I was mistaken. The servant looked confused. Huh? Cedric looked directly at him and said, I thought that the person I was talking to was the butler of Rosan Estate. But it seems that you're actually Lord Lawrence's butler. Terrified, the servant immediately apologized over and over again. As Cedric silently turned away, Artezia's earlier words echoed once more in his mind. All I want is to receive the inheritance from Marquis Rosan and become independent. Please protect me and stay legally married to me for just 2 years. Your Grace, finally understanding her situation more clearly, Cedric quietly thought. So this is why she asked me to protect her. Meanwhile, at Count Indel's estate, the grand ballroom was filled with music, laughter, and nobles dancing elegantly together. However, despite the lively atmosphere, Artezia remained standing quietly near the wall. Noticing her expression, Lady Lila approached her with a playful smile. Why do you have such a sad look on your face, Lady Artezia? Artezia calmly replied, Oh, Lady Arshia. Lila sighed dramatically. You came early, but you haven't even danced to a single song yet. Artezia answered quietly. Someone has to stay and decorate the walls. Hearing that, Lila placed a hand over her chest dramatically. Oh my, if you say it like that, I'll be sad. All the men here lack manners and decency. Then she smirked teasingly before continuing. However, Lady Artezia is also at fault. Since you came in a dress that you've already worn 4 times. How could the gentlemen here tell if they've already danced with you or if it was actually at the last ball? The surrounding nobles immediately burst into laughter, clearly mocking Artezia openly. Lady Eunice looked at Artezia mockingly and said, Seriously? Meanwhile, another noblewoman laughed softly. Yes, apparently she's worn that same outfit 4 times now. However, instead of becoming embarrassed, Artezia calmly smiled and replied, Well, with my ugly appearance, wouldn't it just be a waste if I were to wear a dress that costs several hundred gold? Especially that dress. Then her sharp eyes slowly moved toward Lila's luxurious gown. From the embroidery on that velvet, I hazard a guess that it's from the southern kingdom of Yurns, correct? Such precious clothes should only be worn by ladies as beautiful as you, in order to give justice to the designer's work. Immediately, Lila's expression brightened proudly. Oh my, it seems like you have good taste. However, Artezia calmly tilted her head slightly and asked, But is it all right? Confused, Lila blinked. Is what all right? Artezia continued innocently. Embroidered velvet from Yurns is so expensive that using it for an entire tailored dress would cost 10,000 gold in just the material alone. And from what I've seen, this is the 4th time you've worn a dress made of embroidered velvet. If so, then her eyes narrowed slightly. Count Arcia must be investing nearly half of his territory's annual income on your dresses alone. Instantly, the atmosphere became awkward. Lila's smile stiffened. What did you just say? However, Artezia calmly continued as though completely unaware of the tension she had created. Ah, Count and Countess Arcia must love you very much. So they haven't told you. The Count's main source of income is from the marble mining business. Right now, it isn't very profitable, so it will likely close in a year or 2. At present, the profit margins have no doubt drastically decreased. To my knowledge, it's on the brink of bankruptcy. The surrounding nobles immediately began whispering among themselves in shock. Meanwhile, Artezia continued calmly. Well, I mean, if it's just simply lavish spending, then it would be an excessive amount. But if it's an investment made for the family's future, then it may not be such a large sum after all. With your beauty, you will definitely fulfill your parents' expectations. Immediately understanding the hidden meaning behind those words, Lila's face turned red with humiliation and anger. Are you implying that my parents plan to sell me off? However, before the argument could continue any further, the atmosphere of the ballroom suddenly shifted completely as everyone turned toward the entrance. To grace us with your presence today, What's the occasion? Grand Duke Ebron. Instantly the nobles began whispering excitedly among themselves. It's Grand Duke Ebron, so cool, why is he here? Who could he be meeting? It's said that his grace doesn't like women. Is anybody here acquainted with his grace? Meanwhile, Lila immediately rushed forward nervously and bowed. Grand Duke Ebron. Greetings. However, before she could even finish speaking, Cedric walked straight past her without even sparing her a glance. The entire ballroom froze in shock as everyone watched him stop directly in front of Artezia. One of the nobles gasped quietly. He stopped in front of Marquis Rosan's daughter. Cedric then calmly greeted her. How are you, Lady Artezia? Artezia slowly placed her hand into his as she replied carefully, What brings you here, Your Grace? Immediately, whispers exploded throughout the ballroom. However, Cedric ignored everyone completely. Instead, he gently lifted her chin and carefully examined her face. Why is your face in such a state? Artezia looked startled. Pardon? Cedric's eyes darkened slightly. Your cheek is swollen. You have scratch marks that appear to have been caused by fingernails, and the corner of your mouth is torn. Artezia quietly tried to stop him. Your Grace. However, Cedric immediately asked, Did Countess Eunice do this to you? I met Countess Eunice at the palace today. We spoke, and she told me to send her apologies. By any chance, was it she who? Before he could continue further, Artezia quickly interrupted him in a low voice. Please don't say anything more, else I'll be placed into a difficult situation. After hearing her answer, Cedric quietly stared at her for a moment before finally saying, Let's go back. Artezia calmly nodded. All right. However, just as they were about to leave together, Lila hurriedly stepped forward once more, Your Grace. I apologize for my sudden introduction. I am Lila, Count Arkea's daughter. It's not proper for a gentleman to come to a ball and leave without dancing to a single song, especially when there are numerous young women without dance partners. As the music echoed through the ballroom, Lila tried once more to stop them. She said it wasn't proper for a gentleman to attend a ball and leave without dancing, especially when so many young ladies still lacked partners. Ebron calmly asked, Are you a friend of Lady Artezia? Startled, Lila hesitated before answering yes. Ebron's gaze turned cold as he replied that a true gentleman should first help a woman in an uncomfortable situation. And if she was truly Tia's friend, then she should have shown concern for her instead of staring at him. The entire ballroom fell silent as Tia gently grabbed Ebron's arm, drawing everyone's attention toward them. While looking at her closely, Ebron noticed how pale and exhausted she looked. Despite being the heir of a marquis's house, she wore the same dress she had worn to the temple the previous day, and her thin wrists revealed how neglected she truly was. Extending his hand toward her, he softly asked, Then, Lady Artezia, may I ask for a dance? The nobles gasped in shock. Grand Duke Ebron, the man rumored to hate social gatherings and women alike, was inviting someone to dance. Tia hesitated, saying she didn't want to attract even more attention, but Ebron calmly replied, You already have. It's all right, Lady Artezia. The Grand Duke Ebron makes for a lovely accessory. Quickly. Finally, she placed her hand in his and nervously admitted, I might step on your feet. I'm not well versed in dance. Ebron answered with a faint smile, Then even if we step on one another's feet, let's agree to be forgiving. I can't dance either. Yet the moment they stepped onto the floor, the two moved together perfectly, as though they had danced together countless times before. The nobles whispered in amazement, saying they suited each other perfectly. Tia felt as though the crowded ballroom had disappeared, leaving only the two of them beneath the lights. It hadn't been like this in her previous life. Ebron quietly admitted that he had assumed she couldn't dance, because he had never seen her do so before. Tia replied that she had also heard rumors claiming the Grand Duke never danced. While they continued moving across the floor, Ebron lowered his voice and revealed the true reason he had asked her to dance. Please look after Lucia. Tia looked up at him in surprise and asked why he would request such a thing from her. Ebron confessed that he did not trust Lawrence. Tia questioned whether he truly trusted her instead. Ebron admitted that he knew she had done everything possible to make Lucia marry Lawrence, even fabricating a message from God to secure his legitimacy. However, regardless of her intentions, it had still been Lucia's choice in the end. He then quietly confessed that he saw Lucia as a younger sister and simply wanted to protect both her and the Empire for as long as possible. Tia answered that she could never ignore the sincerity behind his words, but deep inside, she thought bitterly that nothing terrible had happened yet in this timeline. Suddenly, her foot slipped during the dance, and just as she began to fall, Ebron swiftly caught her by the waist, pulling her safely into his arms. The moment Ebron caught Tia in his arms, the entire ballroom erupted in shock. The crowd gasped loudly, and soon the nobles began clapping and cheering in excitement. Whispers spread everywhere as people stared at the pair in disbelief. "Wha!" someone shouted, while others murmured, "Was he always that good at dancing? And they look so good together." Still holding her close, Ebron smirked slightly and said, "I'm a better dancer than you." Tia immediately protested, saying, "You're a renowned warrior. Isn't it quite cruel to compare our movements?" Hearing her response, Ebron suddenly let out a quiet laugh. "Theft, haha." It was a rare sight, enough to make everyone around them stare even more in astonishment. Later, outside the mansion, a carriage waited as the night finally came to an end. While Tia sat inside the carriage preparing to leave, she softly thanked him. Ebron looked at her and asked, "For what?" Tia replied, "For dancing with me." Ebron calmly answered that it was simply his duty as a gentleman. But Tia shook her head and admitted that she knew he had done it to help preserve her dignity in front of Lady Artezia. Ebron brushed it off as nothing important. After a brief silence, Tia asked him for another favor. When he told her to speak freely, she said, "I want to go to Levga. Will you come with me?" Ebron immediately frowned. Levga was a dangerous slum avoided even by most men, so he questioned why she would want to go there. Tia only replied that there was someone she needed to meet. As the carriage traveled through the dark streets, Tia quietly asked if he had reached a decision regarding her offer. Ebron repeated it back to her, saying, "You mean the offer for a 2-year contract marriage where, in exchange, you'll make me the emperor?" Tia answered yes. Before giving his answer, Ebron said he had one question. He wanted to know why the marriage had to last only 2 years. Tia hesitated. Deep inside, she remembered the future she alone knew. The future where Ebron would eventually fall in love with the Sphinx's Lycia, the woman whose beauty rivaled a blooming rose. She did not want him to be mocked as a man who abandoned his wife for another woman. However, she couldn't reveal that truth. Instead, she quietly answered that she simply did not wish to become empress and believed the empire would be better off without someone like her in that position. Ebron stared at her for a moment before saying she seemed far too determined to sacrifice herself for the empire. Then his expression turned serious as he finally gave his answer. He said he had one condition: he would never allow harm to come to his people. If she truly wished to stand beside him, she needed to remember that. Tia nodded obediently, but Ebron narrowed his eyes and replied that she didn't sound like she truly understood. Then, in a much softer voice, he clarified what he really meant. "What I'm saying is that you, yourself, mustn't get hurt. Don't ever let that happen again. Rather, it should be you hitting them." Hearing such unexpected words from him, Tia could not stop herself from giggling softly. Embarrassed, Ebron quickly corrected himself and awkwardly added, "What I mean is, please do not get hurt." Tia smiled faintly and thanked him for his concern. Eventually, the carriage arrived at Levga. Ebron stepped down first and opened the carriage door for her. Raising his hand toward Tia, he carefully helped her down before gently lowering her onto the ground. As he did, he calmly remarked, "No lady should exit a carriage without aid." Tia quietly answered, "Yes, that's right." However, the moment they arrived in the slums, several beggars immediately rushed toward them. They stretched out their trembling hands and desperately pleaded, "Have mercy, fair lady. Would you please spare some change? The more bread you give to the hungry, the more favor God will bestow upon you when you ascend to heaven. Please." The beggars crowded around them desperately, shouting for mercy and spare change while reaching out with trembling hands. "Lady! Take pity on us, please!" Alice quickly stepped forward and handed Tia a large draped cloak to cover herself. Ebron noticed this immediately and asked if she always prepared such clothing beforehand, since it did not seem like she had originally planned to visit a place like Levagad today. Tia calmly explained that her silver hair naturally attracted too much attention. Nearby, the coachman shouted at the beggars to move aside as the starving people continued staring at the group with hollow eyes. Ebron quietly told Tia they should continue moving, and together they walked deeper into the slums. After some silence, Ebron finally asked who exactly they were going to meet. Tia answered that they were searching for the former butler of the Rosan estate. She explained that his family had served the Marquis' household for generations, but shortly after the previous Marquis died, he had suddenly been dismissed. Tia admitted she could trust almost no one anymore. Although the man likely hated both her and her mother, she still wanted to place her faith in the loyalty his family had shown to the Rosan family for generations. Hearing this, Ebron quietly observed how strange it was that a man who had served one of the empire's wealthiest, noble families his entire life was now forced to live in a place like this. Eventually, they arrived at a miserable old house where rats crawled out from holes in the walls. Ebron pushed open the door and stepped inside first. An old man looked up at them cautiously and asked what could possibly bring such esteemed guests to a place like this. Tia politely asked if he could spare them a moment, and after hesitating, the old man agreed. He told his fellow worker not to worry, saying it was not as though they would kill him before leading the group outside to speak privately. Once outside, the old man introduced himself and explained that although the location was disgraceful, he had no better place to receive guests because of his lowly work. He immediately assumed Ebron had come because of the Rosan family and bitterly declared that despite being thrown away, the Hansen family had served the Marquis household loyally for generations, so there was nothing left for him to reveal. Ebron calmly corrected him, saying he was merely Tia's guard. That moment, Tia slowly removed her hooded cloak, revealing herself fully. The old man's eyes widened in shock as she greeted him properly. "Greetings, Mr. Marcus Hansen. I am Artezia Rosan." The old man froze upon seeing her face. She resembled Lord Michael far more than Marilia, the woman he blamed for destroying the Rosan family. After staring at her for a long moment, he admitted that she truly looked like the late Lord Michael, and addressed her as the heir apparent of the Rosan family. Hearing those words made Tia pause. She quietly admitted that he was the first person who had ever acknowledged her as the true heir. Hansen then cautiously asked whether her mother knew she was there. Tia answered honestly that Marilia did not know, and if she had known, she never would have allowed this meeting to happen. The old butler then asked if Tia truly understood what her mother had done. Without hesitation, Tia confessed that she knew everything. She admitted that Marilla had poisoned every direct descendant of the Rosan bloodline and then framed the Hansen family for the murders in order to make Tia the sole heir to the Marquis title. The moment those words left her mouth, Hansen's expression twisted with fury. Tia calmly confessed that her mother had poisoned every direct descendant of the Marquis Rosan lineage and framed the Hansen family in order to make her the sole heir to the title. The moment those words left her mouth, Hansen's expression twisted with rage, and memories he had tried to bury for years suddenly resurfaced. He remembered the day his daughter desperately begged him not to protest against Marilia. She had warned him that even if he possessed undeniable proof of Marilla's crimes, they would all still die. Hansen had shouted in frustration that the murderer's identity was obvious and questioned who would protect them if they spoke the truth. But his daughter bitterly explained that none of the Rosan relatives would help because they were all blinded by greed over the inheritance. She'd even asked him whether Miss Artezia herself would truly feel grateful if he exposed her mother's crimes, reminding him that by doing so, he would only become Marilla's enemy in the end. Hansen had gathered his family together and ordered them to abandon the Hansen's surname and erase all ties to the Rosan estate if they wished to survive. Yet, despite giving that order, he himself had never abandoned the name. Even after the purpose of the Hansen lineage disappeared, he still clung desperately to the identity he had carried his whole life. Now old and exhausted, he had simply accepted that if Marilla ever discovered him, death would eventually come for him anyway. Returning to the present, Hansen glared at Tia and demanded to know why she had searched for him. Tia lowered her head respectfully and addressed him as Mr. Hansen, before quietly stating that the first thing she needed to do was offer him her sincerest apology. Shocked, Hansen could barely repeat the word. Tia then explained that this apology was not on behalf of her mother, but from herself as the last descendant of the Rosan family. She apologized because she had failed to protect the loyal retainers of her house. Calling herself the heir, Tia bowed deeply and said, "I am sorry." Hearing those words, Hansen's eyes slowly filled with tears. Meanwhile, back at the Rosan estate, Marilla furiously smashed a pot onto the floor after hearing the report from the butler. Bill nervously explained that Grand Duke Ebron had questioned why the servants remained loyal to her instead of Miss Artezia, the rightful heir of the estate. Marilia exploded in anger, demanding to know who Ebron thought he was to say such nonsense. Bill trembled as he admitted that Ebron had declared he would personally inform Artezia about what had happened. Marilla raged even further, but Bill helplessly explained that there was nothing he could do against the Grand Duke. After all, Ebron could have killed him on the spot if he wished. Left seething in silence, Marilla began thinking about how Artezia could have possibly caught Grand Duke Ebron's attention. In her eyes, Tia possessed none of the charm or beauty needed to attract a man like him, especially compared to herself. Yet despite that, Ebron had clearly taken interest in her daughter. Before Marilla could gather her thoughts, someone knocked urgently at the door. The head butler opened it, only for another servant to report that a squire from Grand Duke Ebron had arrived. The squire delivered shocking news after leaving Count Indel's estate. Grand Duke Ebron had boarded Miss Artezia's carriage himself, and the Duke's men had ordered the Rosan estate to wait until the two of them returned together. Bill was stunned the moment he heard the news. "What? Grand Duke Ebron's squire is here?" he exclaimed in panic. Nearby, Roseanne glared sharply at him, making Bill hesitate nervously. At that very moment, Lawrence arrived near the door. Startled, Bill immediately bowed his head and knelt down. "Ah, was your outing to your satisfaction?" he asked carefully. Lawrence ignored the greeting and spoke in a cold voice. "Bill, you said that Grand Duke Ebron's squire is outside. What happened?" Bill stuttered awkwardly. That is." Before he could finish, Rosan smoothly interrupted him with a sweet smile. "Lawrence, my darling prince, welcome home. What brings you to Mother's room?" Lawrence immediately asked. "Mother, did something happen with Grand Duke Ebron?" Rosan laughed lightly as if nothing was wrong. "On what problems could I have had with Grand Duke Ebron? That warrior who prances about battlefields came to find Tia this afternoon. Isn't it odd? Has something angered you?" However, Lawrence's expression only darkened as he carefully observed her. "You look unwell. You didn't do anything to offend the Grand Duke, right?" Hearing that, Rosan looked offended. "Offend him? I didn't even get to greet him. He left as soon as he heard that Tia went out." Lawrence quietly replied, "I understand. If he comes back, stay away and do not interfere. I will deal with him." Shocked by his attitude, Rosan stammered, What do you mean? Someone like me?" Lawrence coldly answered, "You truly don't know? The Grand Duke despises you, Mother. And unfortunately, he despises me as well. For the very same reason Father Emperor cannot appoint me as the crown prince." Rosan's eyes widened in complete shock as the cruel truth pierced straight through her heart. Meanwhile, at Levga, Artezia calmly looked at Hansen and spoke with determination. "Soon, I'll be married and reclaim the Rosan estate from my mother. I'll need your help when that time comes. I want to ensure that I get back all of the Rosan estate's assets." "You kept track of most of the assets and the former employees, correct?" Hansen nodded slowly. "That's correct, but..." He hesitated before continuing. "The Hansen family is still suspected for poisoning the Rosan family years ago. How could I possibly return?" Outside, the sound of cows cawing echoed faintly through the quiet countryside. However, Tia's gaze remained unwavering. "Mr. Hansen, I will become the next Marchioness Rosan. I'll take care of any issues that may arise. There is always a way." Hearing those confident words, Hansen lowered his head respectfully. "Heir apparent, I understand. I shall trust and follow you, heir apparent." Soon afterward, they headed toward the carriage and sat inside before departing. During the ride, Grand Duke Ebron suddenly smiled. "I'm amazed, Lady Artezia." Tia blinked in confusion. "Pardon?" Ebron continued. "Appealing to a person's heart is the best way to persuade someone. It seems that you're well aware of this at such a young age." However, Tia calmly shook her head. "My intention was not to appeal to Mr. Hansen's heart. I was just giving him a valid excuse." Ebron looked intrigued. "An excuse?" Tia explained quietly. "Mr. Hansen is facing some financial distress. He also has a 14-year-old granddaughter to care for. He has likely wanted to escape Levigod for a while now. But without a suitable excuse, he wouldn't have taken my offer." Hearing her explanation, Ebron suddenly smiled warmly. Tia immediately noticed and asked, "Why are you smiling?" Ebron replied softly, "It seems like you see yourself as a villainess." Tia answered without hesitation, "Because it's true." But Ebron gently shook his head. "If a person remembers a time of honor, they'll want to escape their disgrace. But only that person can decide when they'll escape. You aren't giving Mr. Hansen an excuse. You're giving him an opportunity to regain his honor. He is returning to the estate for you." Tia looked slightly startled. "For me?" Ebron nodded. "That's right. Because he loves the Rosan estate." Before the conversation could continue further, the carriage driver suddenly announced, "We have arrived." As the carriage stopped, Ebron gracefully offered his hand to Tia. After a brief moment of hesitation, Tia placed her hand in his, and he carefully helped her step down from the carriage. Immediately, a servant rushed toward them and bowed deeply. "Welcome, Your Grace. Did you have an enjoyable outing, miss?" "Your Grace, Master Lawrence wanted to invite you to dinner," Ebron calmly answered. "Let's save that for another time, however." A faint smile appeared on his lips as he looked directly at Tia. "My answer may change if Lady Artezia were the one to invite me." Hearing those words, Tia casually turned her gaze toward Ebron, silently staring at him as the atmosphere between them subtly changed. The servant stood frozen for a moment as Ebron calmly spoke. "Let's save that for another time. However, my answer may change if Lady Artezia were the one to invite me." Tia, standing nearby, answered with quiet restraint. As an unmarried woman, I'm reluctant to invite a man who isn't a relative into my home at this hour. Ebron gave a knowing smile. I knew you would say that. Then he added smoothly, then I shall excuse myself. Tia lowered her gaze slightly. Please be careful on your way back. Ebron mounted his horse with ease, preparing to leave. As he was about to depart, Tia suddenly spoke again. Oh right, come to think of it, may I ask you something? Ebron turned slightly. Go ahead. Tia asked directly, why have you been acting so formal with me? Last time we spoke, you were much more casual. Ebron answered without hesitation. It's not necessary to respect Morella's daughter. But it's only proper for me to be respectful toward my future wife. After saying that, Ebron left, and as his figure disappeared into the distance, Tia stood quietly, a subtle sadness lingering in her expression throughout the journey. Soon after, a maid rushed toward Tia in panic. Miss! Miss! Tia immediately turned. What's wrong? The maid quickly explained. Master Lawrence wants to see you. Tia nodded calmly. All right, I understand. Unbeknownst to her, Lawrence was watching the entire situation from the window. A moment later, Tia stood in front of his door and knocked. From inside, Lawrence's voice came. Welcome, Tia. She entered and asked, Is something wrong, brother? You were looking for me? Lawrence replied. I heard you went out with Grand Duke Ebron. Tia answered honestly. I met him at Count Indel's estate, and we went on a stroll together. Lawrence then asked, Do you plan to meet him again? Tia paused before replying, Can't I? Lawrence calmly said, There's no reason why you can't. You're 18 now. However, you should invite him to our house next time. We haven't gotten a chance to get acquainted yet since he rarely attends social events. Suddenly, a loud scream echoed from outside. Quan, please spare me, madame. Another voice followed in fury. You annoying, despicable. Lawrence dismissed it coldly. It's just a bout of hysteria. It happens quite often. You need not concern yourself with that. It would become a problem if you got hurt, and Grand Duke Ebron noticed. Tia simply responded, understood. But the screaming continued. I was wrong. And then the harsh voice of Rosan echoed, Do you know what you've done wrong? Followed by a loud slap. Tia, hearing everything, stepped outside. Rosan was mercilessly slapping the lady again and again. Tia's thoughts surfaced briefly before, I would've. Then she stepped forward. Mother, stop! Please calm down, Rosan snapped immediately. What? Calm down? Don't you patronize me? This impudent bitch doesn't even know her place. Who are you to stop me? Another slap echoed through the hallway. The maid beside Tia hesitated. Miss, you won't go in? Tia replied bluntly. Do you want me to go in and be beaten instead as per usual? The maid panicked. Ah, no, that's not it. Tia sighed. You should intervene before it gets worse. The maid stammered. Ah, but miss, if I do that, Tia cut in, you wouldn't be alone. If you all share the beating, it wouldn't hurt as much. We'll compensate you generously and cover the medical expenses. Once it's over, bring her to me. Understood? Inside, Rosan continued screaming, annoying, annoying, so annoying, accompanied by another harsh slap. By morning, Rosan lay exhausted on her bed, breathing heavily. Everything is annoying. Later, Tia quietly entered the room carrying a cup of tea. She leaned forward gently. Mother, please have a drink. It's lemon tea. Rosan looked at her suspiciously. You're all grown up now, so you decided to ignore my outburst earlier. Tia calmly replied. Not at all. Brother called for me, so we were discussing matters at the time. There's no way I would ignore Mother. Hearing that, Rosan suddenly pulled her into an embrace. That's right. When I'm old, there's no one else I can rely on other than my daughter. You're the reason I'm still alive. Tia then suggested softly. If you aren't feeling well, how about inviting His Majesty to accompany you to the Summer Palace? Rosan repeated. Summer Palace? Tia explained. Yes, the weather has been very hot lately. Maybe it's time to visit the Summer Palace. It's right in front of the sea. Rosan nodded slowly. Well, it would be nice to escape this hot weather. Do you think Lawrence would have the time? Tia smiled gently. If brother is busy, the two of you could still go on your own, that would be more intimate. Rosan seemed pleased. Should we? Soon after, the Emperor, tired of the ongoing stalemate with Grand Duke Ebron over the Western Army, used Marilla's request for a vacation as an excuse. And so, he left for the Summer Palace with his lover, putting political matters on hold. This gave Artezia some time to herself. A few days later, 2 carriages arrived carrying large boxes of gifts. The mansion was filled with sudden commotion. The butler asked in confusion, What is this? Why are all these boxes here? Emily cheerfully replied, "Hello, Mr. Butler." The owner of a famous boutique, Emily, stood confidently among the staff. The butler frowned. "Madame Emily? We did not order any clothes. Additionally, Marchioness Rosan has gone to the summer palace with the emperor. She isn't here at the moment." Emily laughed lightly. "Haha, that's not it, Tilda. These aren't for the Marchioness. They're for Lady Rosan." The butler froze in shock. "Pardon? Are you talking about the miss?" Emily smiled brightly and declared, "That's right. Grand Duke Ebron sent me. He said she could shop to her heart's content." Emily was directing the staff energetically as she said, "Put that over there. That one goes on top." The butler watched in panic, thinking, "Shit. If Madame sees these piles of boxes when she returns, I'll be reprimanded again." He quickly tried to intervene. "Forgive me for this, but now isn't the best time." The madam hasn't. But he suddenly froze when he noticed a knight nearby. "A knight? That's..." he stammered in fear. Just then, Tia arrived in the main hall. Emily immediately greeted her. "Oh my. Greetings, Lady Rosan," Tia calmly responded. "Welcome, Madam Emily. Don't recall calling for you. What brings you here?" Emily smiled brightly. "Grand Duke Ebron sent me. He ordered the entire catalog." Tia thought in surprise. "His Grace did?" Then she instructed, "Sophie, escort the madam to my sitting room." Sophie quickly replied, "Yes, miss," and guided Emily, who cheerfully followed. "Ho ho ho, all right." At that moment, Sir Alphonse Lewin stepped forward and announced, "I am Sir Alphonse Lewin. By His Grace's orders, I am to escort the heir apparent of Rosan. Up until recently, I acted as His Grace's sword, but now I am to be Milady's shield." Tia calmly accepted. "I understand." She then ordered, "Bill, prepare a room in the same corridor as mine for Sir Alphonse. Prepare rooms for the squires as well." The butler was instantly shocked. "But miss, preparing rooms without either the madam's or the young master's permission isn't..." Tia cut him off firmly. "Bill." Startled, he responded, "Huh?" She looked at him coldly. "Do you need to be reminded of who I am?" "Ah well, miss. Don't act like this. Let's go inside and talk." Bill tried nervously while grabbing her hand. "Isn't this a private household matter?" But Lewin instantly slapped him hard, and in the next second, his sword was at Bill's neck. Tia spoke sharply. "Bill, this is the second time that the Rosan estate was humiliated by their incompetent butler in front of Grand Duke Ebron." Bill panicked. "Miss," Tia continued firmly, "if it was only once, it could be overlooked. These things could happen if one was lazy, so it is possible to lose track of their master's whereabouts. But if it happens twice, it's a disgrace to the household. Sir Alphonse acts as His Grace's eyes, yet you displayed such poor behavior in front of him." "Who am I, Bill?" the butler thought in fear. "Shit. Normally she isn't so difficult," he shouted. "Miss." At this rate, if the madam finds out. But Sophie immediately slapped him and snapped. "If madam finds out what? Are you implying that she beat our miss like so?" Tia then repeated coldly, "So, Bill. Who am I?" Trembling, he covered his mouth and replied, "You are the heir apparent." Tia ordered, "If you understand, go and prepare accommodations for Sir Alphonse and the squires. Once you're done, bring the key and account books to my room." "Huh? What key?" he asked in confusion. Tia repeated firmly, "Did you not understand me? I'm telling you to bring me the vault key." "Yes, I understand." He finally accepted. Sophie thought, "Serves you right for harassing the miss every day," while Bill lowered his head in shame. Tia then apologized to Lewin. "My apologies. You witnessed something unsightly as soon as you arrived." But Lewin respectfully replied, "Not at all. His Grace told me that you are in an extremely difficult position within this family, and that even if you act peculiarly, I should not question you because without a doubt, you would have a reason." Tia repeated in surprise, "His Grace said that?" She thought deeply. Even Lawrence, whom I remained loyal to for the entirety of my past life, didn't trust me. His Grace has sent me a sign of his trust along with his soldier. Now I can finally proceed to the next step. Meanwhile, at Odorov's jewelry store, a soldier asked Evren, "Have you purchased the jewel you intend to propose with? Olga's heart or origami's something?" Evren replied calmly, "They told me to find a Mr. White." The soldier nodded but asked again, "All right, but are you really going to marry Morella's daughter? Isn't she? Not the best choice. On top of that, for the desired proposal gift to be a jewel from some extinct family is..." Evron interrupted coldly, "Is my judgment really that questionable?" "That's not it, it's just..." the soldier tried to explain, but Evron had already mounted his horse. "Let's go." "But your Grace," the soldier called, but Evron insisted, "Let's go together." Evron then recalled Tia's words, "I have a favor to ask of you." When you propose to me, please give me Olga's heart. She had said clearly, yes, Olga's heart. Ebron thought, I don't know why she chose this particular jewel, but she must have had a reason. I'll place my faith in her. They both rode swiftly and arrived at their destination. Where Ebron observed, it seems that they're in mourning. The soldier agreed. I understand that you feel bad, but we need to do this now. It's not like we can set aside another time to come by, right? Ebron finally agreed. All right. The soldier knocked and called. Is anyone there? A girl appeared and asked, You seem like important people. What brings you to this place? The soldier showed a notice. We're here because of this. She gasped, Grand Duke Ebron. They were then invited inside and offered tea. Ebron spoke politely. I apologize for intruding during a difficult time. The girl replied, It's fine. However, in Mr. Odorov's letter, he mentions that your grace is looking for a jewel? Ebron nodded. Yes. Mr. Odorov said that your father has ownership, she explained softly. Father may have passed away, but all the ledgers from when he was a jewelry merchant remain. I will help you to the best of my ability. Which jewel are you looking for? Ebron answered. I'm looking for Sanx's Olga's heart. Instantly her expression changed in shock. That jewel, and both Ebron and his soldier were taken aback by her reaction. Hansen's daughter trembled as she whispered, That jewel. Her voice shook while the soldier silently took the cup of tea from her hand, and Ebron immediately asked, Who did you sell it to? She placed a contract in his hands and answered, This is the contract that transfers ownership of Sanx's Olga's heart. Ebron narrowed his eyes. Baron Yeats. She continued, He bought the jewel with a promissory note 7 years ago, but he continued to delay payment to this day. The soldier examined the document and said, If you look at the contract, it stipulates that full payment must be made for ownership to be transferred. If you sue him, you'd be able to win. She shook her head with tears forming. If we could sue, we would have already done so. However, the diamond was given to Marchioness Camellia, so we couldn't do anything. The soldier reacted sharply. Marchioness Camellia. Isn't she the sister-in-law of Grand Duke Roiger? Due to the large age gap, Grand Duchess Royer obeys her like a mother, and she is also his staunchest supporter. This is quite complicated. The girl broke down, tears falling as she said, His father invested nearly all of his savings into Olga's heart. This brought him to the brink of bankruptcy, and he worked himself to the bone until his last breath. They all but killed my father. Ebron calmly handed over coins and said, I'll buy this contract. This should cover the amount due in the promissory note. And there's extra compensation as well, she cried. But your grace, this contract is only worth a piece of parchment. We kept it because father couldn't bear to discard his last shred of hope. Ebron replied firmly. This contract might have been worthless for your father, but not for me. Later at the mansion, the soldier handed Ebron a drink and commented. How intriguing, Ebron asked. Is it? The soldier continued. At first, I thought Lady Rosan just wanted an expensive jewel for a proposal gift. I never imagined Grand Duke Roiger would be involved. He's your maternal uncle and one of the most powerful people in the Empire. Ebron calmly responded. That is true, the soldier asked. What should we do? He continued. Lady Artezia has basically given you a reason to fight Marchioness Camellia. If we sue for the diamond's return, we can destroy their reputation. An innocent merchant was ruined and died because of them, leaving his children as orphans. This could become a massive scandal, especially during your search for a proposal gift, Ebron replied coldly. I have no intention of exposing the White family just to damage Marchioness Camellia's reputation. There is no sense in dragging Miss White's character through the mud. Then he added thoughtfully, It's like a riddle. The soldier asked. A riddle? Ebron explained. There's an old folktale. In the East, a beautiful princess gave 3 riddles to her suitors, and whoever solved them could marry her. The soldier nodded. Ah, yes, the one where after hundreds failed. A wandering young man solved them and married the princess. Ebron said quietly, Yes. I pray that this is my only riddle. He continued. Let's review the facts. Lady Artezia asked for Sanx's Olga's heart. Due to the promissory note, the object officially belongs to Baron Yeats. Just then Daniel arrived and said, Oh, Baron Yeats. He's a casino owner. He owns a large casino in the Fontaine family's territory. The soldier immediately questioned him. Daniel, how do you know this? You haven't been gambling, have you? Daniel panicked. No, of course not. My younger brother incurred debt there, so I had to pay it off a few times. Ebron concluded calmly. So he's a casino owner. I see where this is going. He's likely one of Uncle Royer's sources of income. The soldier asked, What will your grace do? Ebron replied, What do you think? The soldier answered, A merchant was ruined and died because of a noble who owns a casino. Now that you know, you can't ignore it. Ebron decided, since it's a casino, it should be in full swing now. Let's go. The soldier immediately responded, I'll prepare a group of knights. At Fontaine Casino, cheers filled the hall as a lady shouted, Yes, jackpot! How incredible! Baron Yeats laughed. Profits are looking good today. A butler rushed in. Baron Yeats! Something's happened! The Baron snapped. What have I told you? Don't cause a scene in the main hall. The butler panicked. But it's an emergency. Grand Duke Ebron is here. He has certification of ownership for Senses Olga's heart. The Baron froze in shock. What? Senses Olga's heart. Moments later, Ebron entered the hall with authority. The Baron forced a smile. Greetings, Your Grace. What brings you here? Without wasting time, Ebron showed the contract and asked, Do you know what this is? The Baron hesitated. I'm not sure. The soldier glared, making him panic. Ah yes, that Senses Olga's heart. I bought it 7 years ago, Ebron stated coldly. I have acquired ownership. You haven't made a single payment in 7 years, so I presume there is no issue if I take it. I must also check the diamond and your ledgers. Search the place. The knights immediately began searching as the Baron shouted, Even Your Grace does not have authority to do this in my place of business. Ebron stepped closer. If you have an issue, bring out the diamond right now. The Baron quickly tried to deflect. Your Grace, I have a diamond even more splendid. I can give that instead. Ebron replied firmly. What a pity. I need Senses Olga's heart. The lady I am gifting it to specifically asked for it. It would not do to give her something else. Suddenly a lady approached. Your Grace, there is something you should see, Ebron asked. What is it? She revealed, there is a dungeon in the basement. Ebron's eyes widened. A dungeon? As they descended, what he saw made his expression freeze completely, rows of imprisoned children. Ebron's thoughts darkened instantly. Human trafficking. The soldier shouted in anger. What have these bastards been doing? Ebron's expression darkened as he looked at the scene and said, How could someone do this? To such young children? Back at the mansion, Tia spoke calmly while having tea with Emily. I read somewhere that the things a crown prince experiences will have a lasting influence on his reign as an emperor. I believe this to be true, Martianized Camellia. Emily tilted her head. Is that so, Lady Rosan? Tia continued without hesitation, gambling, drugs, bribery, and even violence are acceptable. The public would simply view those things as typical characteristics of nobility. But if one were to harm a young child, the public would be outraged. In order to placate them, His Majesty would have to feign anger as well. Emily's eyes sharpened. Are you threatening me? Tia replied calmly. I am simply letting you know that it would be in your best interest to withdraw for Grand Duke Roiger's sake. Marchioness Camellia. As they quietly drank tea, Emily smiled and said, I have no idea what you are talking about. What kind of relationship do you think Grand Duke Roiger and Baron Yeats have? Tia answered smoothly. Baron Yeats is a crude man, so he has likely bribed an influential figure in hopes of gaining protection for times like these. However, she smiled faintly, a lady of your standing couldn't have possibly suspected that the jewel the Baron presented to you was forcibly taken from a civilian. Emily thought silently. This young lady is quite clever. It's a pity that we didn't meet sooner. Then she suddenly said, Please wait a moment. Emily placed a box on the table and revealed, Here it is. This necklace was specially designed for the gem Senses Olga's heart. Please accept it as it is. Back when I was not acknowledged as Marquis Ludin's daughter, or even considered a lady, I saw the most honorable empress from afar. At the time, I heard tallies of the family jewel that Her Majesty's friend and attendant, Viscountess Fisher, possessed. Her Majesty treated her friend of lowly status well, and even praised her family's jewel. I was so envious that I still cannot forget that moment. I couldn't stand seeing that vulgar man, who is not even a legitimate noble with such a precious object. This necklace is merely a temporary setting because the statue of Senses Olga is gone. Tia observed her quietly and thought, what an impressive excuse, Marchioness Camellia. If she truly respected the Empress, she would have already presented this to her. In reality, this jewel is a trophy of sorts for the Marchioness. It symbolizes her attainment of status. Outside the mansion, Emily smiled brightly and said, I hope that you will properly communicate my feelings to Her Majesty. Tia replied calmly. I will keep them in mind. Emily added cheerfully, Don't you think that we would make excellent friends? Do drop by once in a while. Later, Tia returned by carriage, and afterwards she sent out missives to begin reinstating the Hansen family into the Rosan estate, finally completing preparations to claim the estate for herself. The next morning at the Rosan estate, a maid greeted, Ebron, welcome, Your Grace. Miss Artezia has instructed me to bring Your Grace to the Twilight Room. Ebron paused. Twilight Room? He thought. The Twilight Room is meant for lovers. Or people who intend to seduce one another. Come to think of it, I am her suitor right now. Emily suddenly appeared excitedly. Oh my! It suits you so well. Your complexion is as white as snow, so any color suits you. How's this yellow one? You have a tendency to lean toward dark colors? You should try these types of clothes too. Oh gosh, this suits you as well. And this, a maid then announced, His Grace, the Grand Duke Ebron has arrived. Both Emily and the maid greeted. It is an honor to meet you, Your Grace. Emily smiled as she observed him. Just then, Tia entered and said, That's enough. Ebron apologized politely. Pardon my intrusion so early in the morning. Tia replied calmly, I had breakfast 2 hours ago. It can hardly be considered early in the morning now, Emily quickly said. You've seen enough garments, so I assume that you'll be proceeding with the tailoring now. I shall take my leave. She then directed the workers, Come now, everybody hurry along, and the room emptied, leaving an awkward silence behind. Tia smiled slightly and said, Have a seat. I'll have tea brought out. As they drank tea, Ebron said quietly, I feel more awake now. I wasn't able to sleep much last night. Tia replied, It seems that meeting Emily has exhausted you more than the lack of sleep had, Ebron admitted. I'm simply not used to it. Many things happened last night. I want to apologize and confirm some things with you. Tia nodded. All right, go ahead, Ebron said. I promised that I would bring you Sencha's Olga's heart, but I'm afraid it will be difficult to fulfill that promise. I don't think I'll be able to propose to you with it. Tia immediately responded, Your Grace. I'm afraid that I am the one who needs to beg for your forgiveness. Ebron looked surprised. Pardon? Tia continued. While you were taking care of business yesterday, I paid Marchioness Camellia a visit to retrieve the necklace. I apologize for deceiving your grace. Ebron exhaled slowly. Is that so? So you knew about it since the beginning. I was disturbed by yesterday's events. I wondered if I should feign ignorance about those atrocities and bargain for the jewel, or if I should deal with the situation even if it costed me the jewel. You anticipated that I would not find the jewel, correct? Tia looked at him and softly asked, Do you know why I like your grace? Ebron froze completely. Tia looks at Grand Duke Ebron and calmly asks him, Do you know why I like your grace? Ebron, slightly surprised, responds, Pardon? Tia continues in a composed tone, saying that since he was born a noble, he had every reason to live protected inside his own bubble. Yet instead he always considers the commoners in his heart. Ebron softly reacts, Oh, and in his thoughts he realizes, that's what she meant. What was I expecting? Ebron then says he plans to visit Chancellor Lin later. Tia acknowledges this and says Chancellor Lin is a just and admirable person, adding that since his grace is part of the military and remains separate from politics, he doesn't need to give up that image just yet. She advises him that it should be enough if he simply checks on how things are progressing from time to time. Ebron then asks her directly what she plans to do with Sinx's Olga's heart. Tia replies calmly that she will present it to the Empress, since it is a keepsake of her deceased friend, and it is only right for the Empress to have custody of it. Ebron responds, I understand. Then Tia suddenly asks him, Are you disappointed? Ebron answers that he already suspected she would do so as soon as he heard about Viscountess Fescher. He then questions what there is for him to be disappointed about. But he adds that now that the gift is gone, an extravagant proposal will be difficult. Without hesitation, Ebron raises his hand toward Tia and says, Please give me your hand. Tia, confused, responds, Pardon? And Ebron gently places a bracelet on her wrist. Ebron tells her, I'll give you this as a proposal gift instead. It caught my eye while I was at the jewelry shop searching for Olga's heart. I wanted to give this to you. Then he kneels down in front of her and asks, Will you marry me? Tia, shocked, can only say, Your Grace. Meanwhile, in front of the Office of Public Security, a large crowd of commoners is shouting angrily that they demand the criminals be arrested and publicly executed. They chant repeatedly, Execute them. Execute them. A man tells a lady that children were abducted and imprisoned only to be slaughtered on hunting grounds for pleasure. The lady reacts in horror, saying how horrible it is. A fat lady adds that the casino owner, Baron Yeats, or whatever his name is, apparently abducted children and sent them to Count Eisen. Another lady reacts in shock, saying they should have known. She adds that Grand Duke Ebron was the one who exposed everything. A man angrily shouts that these inhumane so-called nobles have done this, asking if they are expected to remain silent. The crowd erupts, shouting that even if they have to set the building on fire, they will capture all those involved. Inside Mandarmi Palace, the emperor slams the table and shouts, Silence! How dare you associate yourself with scum like Count Eisen? Now you'll be implicated in this incident. Lawrence responds calmly that they were not close acquaintances. questions whether it was not the emperor himself who introduced him to the previous Count Izan. The emperor angrily asks if he is unable to judge a man's character on his own. The emperor continues in rage, saying of all things it had to be human trafficking and that young children were killed. He asks if Lawrence knows what Cedric said. He explains that Cedric said he could handle the corruption case however he sees fit, as long as he is allowed to put a decisive end to human trafficking. The emperor says that a straight-laced man like Cedric is willing to overlook such a massive corruption scandal, which shows how serious this human trafficking case is. Suddenly, Rosan enters and tells the emperor not to get so angry. The emperor complains that she always comes running in at the first sign of her son in trouble. Rosan leans closer and tells him he cannot stay angry, reminding him that the doctor said he must not get too agitated as it is bad for his heart. The emperor says she coddles him too much, and that this is why he is incapable of accomplishing anything by himself. He boasts that when he was his age, he had already become crown prince through hard work. Rosan whispers that it is simply because his majesty is so exceptional. The emperor then orders Lawrence to quickly cut ties with Izan and says he will handle the rest. He tells him to consider himself lucky because Cedric is headstrong but has a soft spot for his relatives. He warns that for Tia's sake, Cedric will not condemn him. He orders him to leave and find a way to get closer to Cedric when he returns to the capital, and tells him to use his head. He adds that although he is his father, he has no intention of naming him crown prince without just cause, as he does not have the power to do so. Lawrence quietly replies, "I understand." The next day at the Rosan estate, all the staff are busy working. Sophie smiles and asks Tia if she should redo her hair, calling her Miss. Tia replies that it is alright, saying it is just a casual tea party. Sophie insists and says, "Just a moment." Sophie then adjusts Tia's bracelet, making Tia blush as she looks at it. Sophie mentions that slightly shortened sleeves are the trend these days. At that moment, Hazel and Miel arrive and greet her, saying, "Hello, Lady Rosan." It is explained that Hazel's parents own an influential newspaper, and Miel is Sir Kishore's daughter. Tia politely greets them, saying, "It's a pleasure to meet you. I am Artezia Rosan." Miel immediately notices the bracelet and exclaims that it must be the one Grand Duke Ebron gifted her. Hazel also says it is so pretty, adding that nowadays there isn't a single person who hasn't heard of this diamond bracelet. Miel smiles and says that numerous newspapers reported it as a token of Grand Duke Ebron's love. Suddenly a maid rushes in, shouting loudly. Tia asks why she is causing such a commotion and says she can see there are guests present. The maid, out of breath, announces urgently, "The madam has returned." In the mansion estate, a carriage arrived outside, breaking the silence, and a maid immediately said, "H my! Lizzie, isn't that the madam's carriage?" While the other replied, "Seems like it." Lizzie, Marcus's granddaughter, stood nearby as the situation shifted. And soon, Rosan stepped out of the carriage, angrily demanding, "What is all this? Why are there carriages here?" The maid quickly answered, The miss is hosting a tea party today," which made Rosan shout, "What? This is crazy! She's become quite bold while I was away." She stormed inside, saying, "I was going to be nice to her because she helped Lawrence. But that stupid girl has angered me yet again," and Miel added, "Everyone's heard of it," as everyone tried to maintain forced smiles. Until the butler announced, "The madam has returned," and fear spread as Rosan appeared furious. Tia calmly said, "I apologize. I must take my leave," and Miel replied, "Ah yes." But when Tia approached and said, "Welcome back, mother," Rosan snapped, "You crazy bitch," grabbing Tia's hair and shouting, "What did I say? Didn't I say that an ugly and stupid child like you should just obediently stay indoors and do housework or embroidery?" Before slapping her hard as Hazel cried, "Marchioness Rosan, please stop," while Miel fainted and fell, causing panic as Hazel shouted, "Miel, are you alright? Call a doctor." Rosan dragged Tia as Sophie begged, "Please stop, m'lady." But Rosan shouted, "I have to hold back for my own daughter," and slapped Tia again, yelling, "Even if you receive clothing or jewels, a man's interest is still fleeting, you stupid girl. At the end of the day, you can only rely on those of your own blood." While Sophie pleaded again, and the sound of horses suddenly arrived as the door burst open and a maid shouted, "This way, quickly," while Rosan screamed, "Who made you the daughter of a marquis?" continuing to beat Tia and Sophie, then picking up a flower pot and shouting, "How dare you stab me in the back?" and throwing it toward Tia. But Ebron arrived and caught it, asking Tia, "Are you alright?" To which she answered, "Your Grace," while Rosan raged, "How dare you enter someone's home without permission? Get out this instant." And Ebron said, "Stop this," as Rosan claimed. "I am simply a mother teaching my daughter," but Ebron replied, "How is that teaching?" And she shoved him, saying, "I will decide what I can do to my daughter." Until Ebron grabbed her arm and ordered, "Stand down," making her scream in pain, while Tia intervened, "You can't, Your Grace. The Emperor will be angry." And Ebron suddenly lifted Tia into his lap, saying, "Stay still," as Rosan screamed, "Put her down, she's my daughter." Ebron replied, "Not anymore," before ordering Farrell. "The Rosan heir apparent will move into our residence as of today. Seize the mansion," while Tia weakly mentioned guests and meal. But Ebron said, "Just worry about yourself," then carried Tia to her room and laid her near the fire. Later he hesitated as she said, "Your Grace," and he apologized. "I didn't know you were awake," while she said, "You can come in," and thanked him for helping her. But he replied it was obvious. And when she said she didn't think he would come personally, Ebron silently repeated, "You didn't think that I would come personally," wondering if Tia's actions were part of a strategy. Ebron asked her directly, "Was this one of your strategies? I found yesterday's incident quite strange. I'd ordered Alphonse to stay by your side. That order was meant to announce to everyone my desire to be with you and always protect you. You, I, and Alphonse all know that. But somehow, Alphonse was absent on the one day you decided to host guests. On that same day, Marchioness Rosan also returned. Tia calmly replied, I am not omnipotent. But Ebron rejected it immediately, saying, that is not an answer. I ask again, was this one of your strategies? And after a pause, Tia admitted, yes. I wouldn't go so far as to say that it was totally arranged. I just happened to invite some guests over on the day of my mother's return. I wanted a decisive act that would show I severed ties with the Rosan family. Without a catalyst, I couldn't secure the Rosan estate in one blow. I may have confiscated the key and account books from Bill, but that's only a portion. But Ebron suddenly shouted, Tia! Are you telling me that it was necessary for you to be beaten? Tia calmly answered, yes. Ebron covered his face in frustration and said, since yesterday I've been trying to justify your actions to avoid getting angry with you, but you're making it impossible for me. Tia asked, why are you angry? I apologize for not giving you any forewarning. But a very important issue was at stake here, Ebron replied. But you were injured, Tia insisted. I wasn't injured too badly. It may have seemed dangerous at the time. But Mother had no intention of killing me. Ebron immediately warned her, don't do that. Don't use yourself as a tool. Once you start considering that as an option, it will go down a slippery slope. One day, you may even sacrifice your life. Tia thought inwardly, I've already gone through a fate worse than death. I'm not afraid to lay down my life. Then Ebron continued, I've said this before. If you wish to be allies, then you mustn't get hurt. Tia apologized. I'm sorry. But Ebron added, you also made another mistake. Tia asked. Pardon? And he said, don't act like you're an inconvenience to me. Tia replied, I don't think I'm an inconvenience. I feel grateful. I didn't even consider that you'd come in person yesterday. Ebron questioned her. Did you think I would just send my knights? I only did as I naturally should have done. You may think of this engagement as one of convenience. You may not even consider me as a real fiancé, but at least consider me as your partner. Tia responded, I've already vowed to serve your grace. Why do you say such? But Ebron interrupted, then why won't you accept my protection? Your role may be to strategize for me, but my role is to protect you. Now what do you have to say to me? Tia struggled internally, thinking, what do I say? I'm sorry? Thank you. What am I supposed to say? Then she finally said softly, when you came to save me. I was happy. Later in the market, ladies were gossiping, one saying, did you hear the Emperor's mistress mistreats her daughter terribly? Another adding, I also heard that she was preventing her daughter's marriage in order to keep her from her inheritance, and another confirming, that's right. People have been saying that she beat her daughter in front of their guests. While another sighed, my, that poor girl, and another added, such a relief that she got engaged to His Grace Cedric, praising him as such an incredible person, honorable, kind, and knows how to cherish a woman. Not only is he manly, he's also family-oriented. Back at the mansion, Ebron handed Tia a snack and said, you have to eat more, and when she replied, all right, he added, Ansgar and Marcus are worried sick because you never finish your food. I've been ordered to feed you a snack today as well. Is it not to your taste? Tia answered, that's not it, and he asked, how much are you able to eat? She said, about half, so Ebron replied then. Now, you can reassure the chef by finishing the rest. Tia was surprised and asked, you ate all that at once? And Ebron said, it's just a snack, isn't it? Then he casually asked, Come to think of it, where is Lawrence, and what is he doing? Tia answered, he returned to the Rosan estate today, and Ebron immediately said, so you were tracking his whereabouts. Did you let him in? Tia replied, he lives there. I can't prevent him from entering. Besides, Mother resides there as well, and I plan to keep it that way. Ebron warned, Tia, I don't think you need to do that. Lawrence owns plenty of assets as well. But Tia firmly said, things need to stay as they are right now. Ebron responded, you must not push yourself, understood? And she replied, yes, I understand. At that moment, a maid knocked and entered, saying, Miss Artezia, you have a visitor. He's waiting outside in the sitting room, and when Tia asked, who? The maid answered, it's Lord Lawrence. Tia walked through the gallery where the maids greeted her softly. Ah, hello, miss. But inside her mind she thought, I removed the makeup that concealed my bruises, because it wouldn't do if Lawrence didn't see the full extent of my injuries. Soon she entered the sitting room and greeted him, saying, you're here, brother. Lawrence replied, sit. Tia answered, yes, and then said, I heard that you chose not to stay at the summer palace. Lawrence explained, I needed some space. Tia then asked, you've heard the news, right? Have you been to the estate? Lawrence said, yes, I saw that your belongings had been organized. Tia confirmed, yes. Even though the wedding has yet to take place, Grand Duke Ebron insists that staying at the Grand Duchy would be best. Lawrence replied, I see. Tia then asked, how is Mother? Lawrence said, the same as usual. She switches between fits of hysteria and rest. If you're concerned, go visit her. Tia immediately replied, I refuse. It will be some time before I wish to see Mother again. In fact, I think the situation has presented a perfect opportunity. I'm thinking of using this opportunity to sever my ties with Mother. Lawrence questioned, do you mean that? Tia confirmed, yes, while remembering how her mother would switch between abuse and affection, thinking when she had one of her episodes. She'd physically abuse me. Once her anger was exhausted, she would treat me tenderly, and recalling Rose and hugging her while saying, sorry, Tia, it's because I only have you to rely on. Tia reflected, even though I knew this was a never-ending cycle, I couldn't abandon my mother. Things need to change now. Lawrence then warned, Tia, this is not something you should decide so hastily. Don't you love Mother? Tia admitted, I do love her, and thought, that much is true, before continuing aloud. Regardless of that truth, I do not wish to devote my entire life to her. I wish to find happiness with Lord Cedric. This might be my only chance to seize my own happiness in this lifetime, so I will do my best. I may not become a Grand Duchess that inspires veneration, but I would at least like to be properly acknowledged as Lord Cedric's wife. But if I'm forever known as Marilla's daughter, that will never happen. No matter what I do, I'll be condemned. You, of all people, understand that, right? I don't want Lord Cedric to see such a wretched appearance again. Lawrence responded, all right, do as you wish. What will happen to the Rosan estate? I have a few estates of my own, but it will take some time to organize before I can move out. I'll leave the Rosan estate to Mother. I'll also give her annuities that will more than cover the cost of maintenance, as well as her daily expenditures. You can also continue to live there as you have been. All right, I understand. Although it's sooner than expected, congratulations on your engagement. I do wish you had informed me ahead of time, though. Tia then asked, what will you do, brother? Lawrence replied, me? Tia continued, how long do you plan to keep your ties with Mother? Lawrence asked, what is that supposed to mean? Tia said, no one may ever say this to your face. But as Mother's daughter as well as your sister, I'll tell you this. Actually, you are the one who needs to sever ties with Mother the most. Lawrence questioned, what do you mean? Tia explained, Mother is indeed favored by the Emperor, but favor isn't what you need. Even if you were to sever ties with Mother, you're still His Majesty's son, and you don't need His Majesty's favor to become the Crown Prince. What you really need is legitimacy. There's only one person who can grant that to you. She's the only one with the power to adopt an illegitimate child as her own and declare them the heir. The Empress. His Majesty didn't tell you? I thought he would have since he became Emperor through the same means. Perhaps. Mother is fixated upon you, so maybe she's been preventing His Majesty from telling you, Lawrence warned. Tia, don't carelessly make such ominous remarks. You could be accused of treason for those words. Tia immediately said, yes. My apologies. Lawrence added, I don't understand why you're so uneasy. Tia replied, I'm your sister, so I worry about you. Brother's well-being is directly related to mine. Lawrence admitted, your words do have some merit, while Tia thought, it's been done. The trap has been set. Lawrence then said, Don't worry so much. His Majesty is still healthy. Tia responded, yes. I'm sorry for uttering such tactless and ominous words. As Lawrence headed to the door, he said, no need to see me off, and Tia replied, be careful on your way home, brother, while thinking, with no legitimate crown prince, the Emperor would favor Lawrence for only one reason. The Emperor loves Mother, his mistress, dearly, and has decided to build a family with her. But what if fractures were to form within that happy little family? His favor would disappear, and various other factions would try to take advantage of the resulting void. So, the goal is to first create that fracture. Suddenly, a knock came at the door and Tia said, come in, as Bill entered and said, the letter you have been waiting for has arrived. I was worried that Lord Lawrence would see it, so I brought it personally, placing an envelope as he continued. This is an invitation from the Empress, and Tia thought, the final objective I sought to achieve when I put on that show in front of my guests, before finally saying, at last.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope this romantic journey made your heart flutter just like mine. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you never miss another love-filled episode. And don't forget to leave a comment sharing your thoughts. I love reading what you think about the story. Your support means the world. See you in the next romantic adventure.